Okay, welcome back guys to another video going over some chess. Like I said, it's one of my secret little passion things that I do in my spare time, and I always think it's fun. So, today we're going to be showcasing the London system. There's only one way to start the London, and it's always going to be pawn to d4. So, the pawn in front of the queen. Any other sort of variation, any other pawn, it's not going to be considered a London. And the very next important move, depending on what your opponent does, there are many ways to kind of sneak into the London system, but the main line move that you're going to want to do next after your opponent plays, and this is a very common rebuttal to pawn to d4, just sort of matching. But the very next move you're going to want to play is bishop here to f4. And the main reason you want to put your bishop here this early in the game, getting over here, is the London is all about center control. It's all about creating this sort of pyramid we're going to see here in a little bit. And you want to get your bishop outside of the pyramid. You don't want him to be locked in, because as you'll see, he's going to play his developing moves. The very next move, I'm going to play this pawn to e3. And if I waited to play the bishop, he simply couldn't get out. He or she, whatever the bishop identifies as. So, this is definitely the London system. This is what you're going to see. You're going to want to create a little pyramid system, and you're going to want to have your bishop out here. I move the e pawn up to e3. He's going to develop a little. He's trying to control the center a little with his knight. I'm going to bring my knight out, and this is also a very key move in the London development, just clearing out this back rank. This move specifically, developing your knight to d2, is important. He's going to develop his knight. And I'm going to push the c-pawn, and as you can see, with the c-pawn, we're developing a little pyramid here, a beautiful little pyramid. He's going to develop here. He's going to try to take control of this h-file, maybe forcing a attack, opening up his rook. And I'm going to develop my knight. And the main purpose of this is to prevent this pawn from moving here on h4, and also developing the knight off of the back rank, which is a key part of the London as well. You want to get all your pieces out, controlling the center squares, and this knight to f3 is also very important to the London system in the main line. So he's going to continue on developing his pawns. He's trying to set up his little reverse pyramid here. And this move here specifically, bishop to d3, this, if you want to take a snapshot of this, very structure, this in its essence is the London. These pieces exactly as they are right now in the white position. You got your pyramid forming here. You have moved your bishop in the center of this pyramid, and bishop on the outside, and defenders on the flanks. So this right here is the epitome of the London, right here, this position. I wanted to drive that into you with repetition. So I'm pretty much all set up at this point. I'm well developed. Is going to push the A file. So in rebuttal to this is not an improving move and whatnot. It's not threatening any pieces at the moment. So in rebuttal to this, I'm going to simply castle. And you don't have to castle in the London, especially if there's negative attacks coming this way. Who knows? You could have the queen really boating down this way. You don't want to be trapped in a castled position with such a weak king side, but there's not any threats coming at me from the king side over here. So I went ahead and castled, and Going to develop his pieces over here to get his queen side more developed. And this is what I usually do after castling. It's just natural to me. You don't have to do it, but I find it natural. I simply put the F rook on the E file. It helps in many ways. Many ways. First of all, you're attacking the center at all times. In the future, because you still have plenty of pieces in the way. There's this little pawn here that's blocking that, obviously. But you'll definitely see this develop in a very advantageous way. Let's say your enemy bishop decided to move to this a6 position. It's really beaming down into this position, right? And you don't want that. So, just to prevent future attacks, the bishop and the queen work very well together in terms of forming a checkmate easily. I move the rook to e, which is very common. It's a very common tactic. So, I have developed pretty well. I have castled. My opponents they have not really done anything to improve their position, and that's able to exploit the London to the fullest extent here, because it's a very dangerous system. You don't want to mess around with the London. There's plenty of counters. If you want to learn how to do openings, you should learn how to counter openings with white or black. So my opponent at this point develops the knight, and I'm not seeing too many immediate threats to this extent. It would have been a very big threat, and I'll show you exactly why. Let's say if his knight gets to here. At that point, let's say this pawn was out of the way, you would have been forked in a couple different directions. Forked this way, forked that way, and that's if I kept my rook on that F file. At this point, this is where it starts to go very wrong for my opponent. So I am all developed here. I'm all developed. I'm exactly where I want to be. And now it's time to launch an offense. And this, sadly, he was not prepared for. So let's look at that again. Pawn to e4. Its immediate attacks are the e5 pawn. It could push up and really take control of this center in this square. But in this instance, I just place it there, waiting for him to do what he wishes. I don't care if he chooses a different developing move, but the fact is my two pawns they're hanging out in the center, guarding many pieces. So he chose to take. And in my response, I take back with the bishop. And this bishop previously is the one that we put in the center of the pyramid, just waiting. And he is just gonna sit there waiting until something happens in the center for him to protect or an opportunity arises. So, I take the pawn. His response was to push his pawn and threaten my bishop. And in a perfect world, this would be a great move. The bishop either would have to run away. The bishop definitely doesn't want to be taken, and the threat, if I do take back with the bishop itself, his knight could simply recapture. But speaking of, he chose to make this developing move at the cost of his knight. Because if we look up here, this knight is in a sense quite pinned. Because if this knight moves at all, the rook will fall. So my opponent didn't see that at all. He decided to develop his pawn. Just took the knight. And in response to this, he decided to move his king. Do you know why he decided to move his king? Because this was also a discovered check. I checked the king, and I also forked the king and forked the rook. And unless you don't want the game to be immediately over, you're going to move your king. And he didn't quite have an option. He could have moved his queen, which I would have simply gobbled up, but he moved his king. And that's one of the many dangerous tactics about the London system. It really implements the bishops, it puts them on strong diagonals, and tries to control the center to its utmost ability. So, after checking the king, forced move, I went ahead and took this rook. My opponent's response was to move his bishop. And with the foresight, I could have simply moved my bishop as well. But he was trying to open up this position so his queen could take, and let's see that play out a little bit. So, I went ahead and took his pawn. So the pawn is down. My pieces are in full control of the center. This bishop is protected with the pawn, with the knight. And he chose to go ahead and take with the queen. It's logical. My piece just hurt your piece really bad. It might make him angry. But my other bishop is going to go ahead and take your rook. So at this point, he's not in a very good position. My structure is generally the same. At this point, I believe I've lost 2 pieces, and that was willingly, one to provoke an attack and one to just provoke another attack while giving up my light squared bishop there. So, his response to this, which was a very good move, because if we look, obviously it's a good move because I took a rook. But in taking the rook, because we moved the rook, our rook, to the e-file, it opened up this beautiful discovered attack straight in the middle. And I haven't moved this rook in a long time. Look how open this file is. So, he's going to move his king. He has to. He has to get it out of the way of this open file rook. And I'm going to push my h-pawn. And this does a lot of things. It's going to kick this knight away, and it's going to prevent a back rank checkmate here, which is just embarrassing and you never want to happen. But he's down 2 rooks, so I'm sure I would have seen it coming a mile away. And he didn't run. He is a brave man. Instead, he tried to launch his own counterattack with the bishop, attacking my knight. So, maybe a knight for a knight, he was thinking, if you take my knight, I'll surely take yours and we'll be even Stevens. So I took his knight. And he took my pawn. So at this point, his knight is out of the picture. His knight is out of the picture, protecting the center. And I think it is time to deliver a check. And this is a strong check. It's protected in 2 ways. And if he had a second thought of taking my knight here, he has to have action to move the king first. So, he moves the king. He moves the king out of the way. And at this point, I got a little scared. I moved my bishop out of the way. But something else I could have done after he moved his king forward was deliver another check with the queen right here. That would have been very powerful, and I could have probably finished this game a little quicker, but I think this game was a little over to begin with, so let's continue on looking at this. So I moved my bishop out of the way. He starts pushing his pawns. Maybe he can push his pawns enough to promote another queenside attack. We can see what he does. So in response to this, I just give him a check. In the same spot that we had the bishop, which is heavily protected by our knight on f3 and our pawn on f4. So in response to this, he backs up. Now, what would his next move be? What would my next move be? I'm thinking of different strategies in the future. If you can spot at all a piece that I could move to give a check, just let me know. I'll give you time. Nah, I'll go ahead and do it. In a move or two. So, since he started pushing his pawns, I wanted to push my pawns here. And I'm pushing this b pawn to b3 for a very specific reason. which we will see in a second. So, in response to my b3 pawn, he plays c5. And c5 has a lot of ideas. It has a lot of nasty ideas, actually. So the main thing I'm seeing is that he wants to get rid of the protecting pieces. So this rook is protected by a pawn and a knight. Now, as he's pushing his c5, he could take out this pawn, though my knight could just simply take back. This rook would be quite open for any attack. And at the same time, if you haven't spotted it, this queen up here is looking directly at my knight, which is another protecting piece for the rook. Now, if I was a less wiser man, I could have not seen this, developed more pieces over here, maybe thought my bishop would have been good, and he could have easily turned the tides here in a split second, taking out a lot of defending pieces and clearing the center. So, he's threatening my pawn on d4. So what way can we absolutely make sure he does not take that in the next move? Well, my last move was moving my pawn to b3, d4, and in the next instance, I move my knight. I move my knight to c4, and what this does is put initiative on him to move the king. He is in check. So, what does the opponent do? He has to simply move out the way to a protected square. He decides to move there. Since he did not take my pawn, I decide to move my pawn up, which is very protected. He can't take the pawn because the rook is looking at it, the queen is looking at it, and it's simply an oversight, because he could have taken the pawn if I didn't check him. He could have prevented that in a sense. But since he didn't take the pawn, and it's the closest piece, I went ahead and gave him a check. So in response to this, the king could have done a few things. He could have done a few things. He could have simply backed up, met with his queen, had a good little date night, but he decided to move forward. And this is a bad move. He's pinning himself in a bunch of different horrific spots. And this whole game, I think I lost 3 pieces, and all of them I meant to give up at some point. But there are a lot of pieces that haven't moved at all. This rook on A hasn't moved at all. A couple of my pawns haven't moved. And one pawn that can be a shining star right now is the pawn on A, and giving a checkmate to the king. The king simply can't take here, it's defended by the rook. Can't take here, it's defended by this. He can't move forward, it's defended quite heavily. And if he moves back, this pawn would just take. So, all this is stemming from this beautiful London structure that we see here. Now, people you'll go against will stop this, surely. And this is the ideal situation we want to get put in, just forcing errors, forcing non-progressive moves, just for the sake that your position is so strong. And this was the ideal game for playing the London. I didn't show this game just for the sake that I won, even though that is half the fun, I suppose, but just how this was such a pure example of the London system that it was just hard not to show. Hopefully you guys have taken some notes, maybe learned a little thing or two, and going out and try the London. And it's fun to implement, because at any point you can change it, you can maneuver it, you can mold it to how you like and what the opponents are doing, and still stay in the general feeling of the London, where you're controlling the center, controlling diagonals, and putting pressure on the pieces. But okay, I hope you guys have enjoyed the video, and I will hope to see you again.